Welcome, my friend. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Let your body sink into the bed and take a deep, steady breath. You are safe here. You are calm here. And tonight, we will travel back in time, not into the loud, clashing moments of history, but into the quiet ones. We are not here for battles or victories or losses. We are here to wander gently through the silent spaces in between, the pauses, the stillness, the forgotten hours when soldiers rested, when weary men put down their swords, and the world exhaled after war's noise. So close your eyes if you'd like, and imagine yourself walking slowly through the soft grass of a camp. The fires are low, the voices are hushed, and we are simply here to see how they found rest. The battlefield. In our imagination, it is always noisy. We picture the clash of swords, the cries of men, the banners raised high. But history was not only made in moments of noise. Much of it lived in silence, in the hours before and after, when soldiers rested. Picture, if you will, a soft evening in the medieval world. The sun has dipped low beyond the horizon, and the air is cool and gentle. The sounds of war are gone now, replaced by the soft crackle of firewood and the quiet shuffle of tired boots against the grass. A line of tents stretches across a field, simple canvas shapes, their ropes tied firmly to wooden stakes. Inside, men remove their armor piece by piece, a clatter of steel greaves, the sigh of leather straps released, the weight that pressed on their shoulders all day finally set aside. They sit down on logs or simple stools. Some remove their shoes and stretch their aching feet. Others lean back against tent poles and close their eyes. The camp becomes a small village of its own, alive not with war but with the simple act of rest. As the night deepens, the fire becomes the heart of the camp. Every soldier, no matter his station, feels its pull, the warmth against the cool air, the glow against the darkness. It is a place for stories, for bread passed from hand to hand, for bits of cheese, or meat roasted slowly on skewers. You can almost hear the quiet chatter, not loud, not boastful, but low and steady, like the hum of bees in summer. A soldier might tell a tale of his village, describing the curve of the river where he fished as a boy. Another hums a tune, a melody from his homeland, carried on the wind. And sometimes silence says more than words. They sit together, gazing into the flames, thinking of home, thinking of tomorrow, yet grateful for this pause. Not all found rest in the same way. Some were watchers, the guards who walked the camp's edge, their eyes scanning the horizon for danger. But even this was a quiet duty. The sound of boots in grass, the faint hoot of an owl from the woods, the wind brushing the canvas tents. These men, though awake, felt the stillness of night more deeply than most. They would sometimes stop for a moment, leaning on their spears, looking up at the stars. And in that vast, endless sky, a soldier might remember that he was small, just one man under heaven's wide blanket. When it came time to sleep, some lay inside tents, huddled on straw mats or simple blankets. Others stretched out beneath the open air, their cloaks drawn up over their heads. The night could be cold, but there was comfort in the closeness of comrades. Shoulder to shoulder, they shared warmth and safety. The air smelled of smoke and earth, with hints of bread still baking in the coals. Far away, a dog barked faintly. Somewhere, a horse snorted and pawed at the dirt. And slowly, one by one, the voices faded. The fire burned lower. The camp grew still. Even in the ancient Roman world, soldiers found rest in similar ways. The Roman legions, known for discipline and order, built camps that were almost like small towns, streets lined with tents, a central fire, watches posted at every corner, but inside their tents, the same humanity showed itself. Soldiers stretched out on mats of straw, sharing dried figs or bits of cheese. Some cleaned their sandals or oiled their armor straps. Others sharpened blades quietly, not for battle tonight, but simply because hands liked to be busy. And in the Roman night air, a soldier might whisper a prayer to his household gods, a small wooden figure tucked into his pack, a memory of home. He would touch it gently, close his eyes, and so, across time, whether in Europe, Asia, or faraway deserts, soldiers rested between battles in these small human ways, not as warriors, but simply as men, hungry, tired, in need of warmth, in need of peace. Sometimes, when soldiers rested between battles, the silence of the camp would be filled not with words, but with the gentle rhythm of small tasks. A soldier might sit quietly by the dim light of an oil lamp, mending a torn piece of cloth, carefully threading the needle through the fabric. Each stitch was slow, steady, and almost meditative. In that calm moment, the world of war seemed very far away, replaced by the simple focus of hand and thread. The soft scratching of the needle against cloth could blend into the quiet crackling of a fire, creating a background of gentle sounds that eased the mind. In some camps, soldiers would sit together, not speaking much, but sharing the warmth of a common meal, a simple bowl of stew, bread baked that morning, or roasted grains could feel like a feast after days of marching. Eating together was not just about filling the stomach. It was about reminding each other that they were not alone, that they were a part of something bigger, and that bonds of brotherhood were being quietly woven with each shared bite. Imagine the soft clinking of spoons, the faint laughter that broke out occasionally, and the warmth of food that brought peace to tired bodies. When night fully settled and the stars stretched wide across the sky, many soldiers would lie on their backs, gazing upward. For a moment, their lives felt small beneath the endless sky. Some whispered quiet prayers. Others traced the constellations, wondering if their loved ones far away might be looking at the same stars. The sound of distant owls or the low rustle of leaves in the breeze created a natural lullaby, wrapping the camp in a feeling of safety, even in uncertain times. Not every moment of rest was quiet, though. Sometimes music filled the camp. A soldier with a lute, a flute, or even just a simple drum might begin to play. The tune would be slow and calming, flowing gently through the air. Other soldiers might hum along softly, their voices blending into a tender chorus. Music became a way to ease the heart, to carry away heavy thoughts, and to remind everyone of home. These melodies were rarely loud or bold. Instead, they were soft, steady, and comforting, like the kind of tune that lingers in the air long after the notes fade. And then there were the stories. Soldiers loved to tell talesome about heroes of the past, others about distant lands, and sometimes simple stories from their own childhood. Around a fire, with shadows dancing on their faces, they would take turns speaking in calm, steady voices. The stories didn't need to be dramatic. Often they were told slowly, with pauses, almost like lullabies in words. The listeners would nod off one by one, their eyes growing heavy, until the last voice faded into the stillness of the night. As the night deepened, the air grew cooler. Soldiers would pull their cloaks tightly around their shoulders, using them as makeshift blankets. Some carried small woolen pouches stuffed with straw to use as pillows. Others simply rested their heads on their folded arms, letting the earth be their bed. The ground was hard, but the body, after days of marching and fighting, welcomed any surface where it could finally be still. The quiet hush of night wrapped itself around them, and the soft rhythm of breathing could be heard, like waves moving gently in and out. In larger camps, watchmen were always stationed, standing at the edges of the campfires, their silhouettes outlined against the glow. They walked slowly, their armor softly clinking, keeping eyes on the horizon. But even they felt the peace of the night. Sometimes, when everything seemed calm, the guards would lean lightly on their spears, watching the flicker of firelight and listening to the distant sounds of nocturnal life, an owl calling, a dog barking from far away, or the faint rustle of wind through trees. Rest did not always mean sleep. Many soldiers used the quiet hours for writing letters, if they could write, or asking a companion who could, to help them put their thoughts on paper. They wrote by candlelight, their words slow and careful, often beginning with simple greetings to their families. They spoke of health, of longing, of prayers for safety. These letters carried a softness within them, written in the middle of war, yet filled with love. The scratching of quills on parchment was a delicate sound, and the candle's glow gave the act a sacred calmness. Others, less inclined to write, might take a small object from their pouch or charm, a piece of cloth from home, or a simple carved figure. They would hold it quietly in their hands, as though the object itself was breathing comfort into them. These little items were anchors of peace, reminding them of where they came from and giving them strength to face the uncertainty of tomorrow. Sometimes the camp itself would glow faintly under the moonlight, the shapes of tents, the curve of shields resting against posts, and the outlines of helmets scattered nearby became part of a silent landscape. Soldiers sleeping side by side formed patterns, like a human mosaic, with each figure blending into the next. The campfire, now burning lower, sent up gentle sparks that drifted into the cool night air before fading. It was a quiet dance of light and shadow, soft, fleeting, and endlessly calming. When morning approached, but before the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, the camp was often at its most still. The soldiers who had managed to rest deeply were lying motionless, their breaths slow and steady. Those who had stayed awake on watch could hear the subtle shift of night giving way to dawn, the faint crow of a distant rooster, the soft flutter of birds stirring in nearby trees, the almost inaudible rustle of the wind changing direction. But the nights before those mornings were precious. The time between battles was not only for physical rest, but also for emotional healing. Many soldiers would gather in pairs or small groups near a slowly burning fire, They spoke quietly, their voices barely above a whisper. They did not always talk about war. Instead, they shared simple stories about their families, their childhood, the food they missed most, or the little traditions of their villages. These conversations were gentle, carrying no urgency, no weight of strategy, just human voices weaving warmth into the cool night. Some soldiers played soft music to soothe themselves and their companions. A wooden flute, a small lyre, or even a drum tapped softly with fingertips could fill the silence with gentle rhythms. The sound was never loud, always careful, always tender, as though the player knew that quiet beauty was the greatest comfort. Those listening would close their eyes, allowing the melody to carry them away from the present moment into memories of more peaceful times. Others would hum old songs, often lullabies they remembered from childhood. These quiet tunes, drifting across the camp, became like a blanket of sound. The words were not always clear, but the feeling they carried was unmistakably sense of safety, of home, of mothers and fathers, of evenings spent by warm hearths far away. Even the roughest warriors found comfort in such moments, their hardened faces softening in the glow of the fire. The stars above offered another kind of rest. Soldiers lying on their backs would trace patterns across the sky, pointing to constellations they recognized. Some believed that those who had already passed on were shining down from the heavens, watching, guiding, protecting. The act of stargazing brought quiet thoughts, reminding each soldier that the world was vast, and that battles, though fierce, were only moments in the flow of time. Under the endless night sky, their worries seemed smaller, lighter, easier to set aside. In these long, restful pauses, sleep came slowly, like a tide rising over the shore. It began with heavy eyelids, then the soft surrender of muscles, until finally the soldier's mind drifted into dreams. The dreams themselves were not always free of war, but the gentle rhythm of the camp, the soft breathing, the crackling of fire, the distant night sounds helped carry them deeper into peaceful rest. As the fire burned lower, its embers glowing faintly in the cool night, the camp became quieter still. The gentle crackle of the last sparks provided a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat for the resting soldiers. Some leaned against their rolled cloaks, heads bowed, already drifting in and out of light dreams. Others sat silently, staring into the glowing coals as though searching for memories. Hidden in the shifting red and gold light, the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke, mingled with the earthy smell of damp soil and grass. It was a familiar scent, one that reminded the men of every camp they had passed through, every night they had survived. It became a comfort, a sign that, despite the uncertainty of tomorrow, tonight they could pause. There were small rituals in these resting hours, quiet habits that helped the soldiers feel grounded. Some rubbed oil into their boots to soften the leather, a practical act that also gave their hands something gentle to do. Others carefully checked their swords or polished a small piece of armor, not out of urgency, but out of routine, the rhythmic motions helping them calm their minds. It was less about readiness and more about peace in the repetition. A few men carried tiny charms with them, simple tokens, tied to their belts or hidden in their pouches. Perhaps a smooth stone from a river near their home, or a cloth embroidered by a loved one. These little objects, held in their hands, gave them comfort. In the quiet, the touch of something familiar was a reminder that they were more than soldiers. They were sons, fathers, brothers, and friends. Sometimes, after the softest conversations had faded and silence returned, one man might softly begin to hum. No words, only a low, steady tune that blended with the night. Others would close their eyes and let the sound wash over them. The hum was not meant to entertain, but to soothe. Like the murmur of water flowing over stones, or the wind brushing through tall grass. And then there was the sky. For soldiers far from home, the stars were their truest companions. The patterns above remained unchanged, no matter where they marched or camped. To some, the stars were guides, to others they were a canvas of stories told long before. Lying beneath them, wrapped in cloaks, the men let their eyes wander upward until the heaviness of sleep finally pulled them into stillness. The night watch, though awake, also shared in this calm. They paced slowly, their steps soft on the earth. Each time they passed the sleeping men, they saw the quiet rise and fall of chests, the relaxed hands resting loosely by their sides. These guardians of the night carried the weight of keeping others safe. But even in their vigil, they felt the same peace. The silence of rest was a gift shared by all. As the night deepened, the camp seemed to dissolve into the darkness around it. The fire had burned down to faint embers, glowing softly like scattered jewels on the ground. A thin thread of smoke rose upward, disappearing into the cool air, carrying with it the last warmth of the day. The soldiers who were still awake spoke little now. Their voices, when heard at all, were no more than whispers, so quiet that the sound faded almost as soon as it was spoken. These whispers weren't meant for storytelling anymore. They were fragments, perhaps a soft memory shared, or a simple remark about the stars above. It was enough just to exchange words in the stillness, like placing small stones on a path to keep one's footing. Some men shifted in their cloaks, curling against the earth for warmth. The ground was not always comfortable, but after days of marching, even the roughest surface could feel like a bed. Their bodies knew the rhythm of exhaustion, and the body's surrender to sleep came easily when the world was calm. A distant owl called from beyond the camp, its voice low and steady, echoing in the silence. The sound did not disturb anyone. It became part of the night's song, blending with the gentle rustle of leaves in the faint breeze. The men who heard it may not have even noticed, their minds already drifting between waking and dreams. In those rare, quiet hours, time seemed to slow. Minutes stretched out, long and soft, like threads of silk. The men resting would not mark the passing of hours as they did in battle. Instead, night became a single, unbroken blanket of calm, wrapping itself around them until dawn. One soldier, lying on his back, gazed up at the stars until his eyelids grew too heavy. Perhaps he thought of home, a village where his family slept beneath the same sky. Another clutched his charm a little tighter, holding on to that last thought of safety before slipping into dreams. And another, still too weary to think, simply surrendered to the silence, his breathing deep and even, as though the earth itself cradled him. Those who stood watch carried a quiet respect for the sleepers. They walked their rounds slowly, their eyes scanning the horizon, each faint sound the crunch of grass under their boots, the distant crack of a branch in the forestry, minded them of their duty. Yet, even for them, the stillness was a comfort. They, too, were part of the rhythm of rest. The night stretched on in this way gentle. Calm. It was not an escape from the struggles of war, but it was a pause, and in that pause, in those precious hours of rest between battles, the soldiers found a fragile but real kind of peace. The night air carried with it a coolness that brushed gently against the soldiers' faces, as though nature itself wished to soothe them. The soft hush of the wind wound through the grass, bending each blade just slightly before moving on, leaving behind the faintest rustle. To those drifting into dreams, it was no more than a lullaby, a background sound that asked nothing but gave peace in return. Near the embers of the fire, a small group of men lay in a circle, their bodies curved inward toward the faint glow. The warmth was subtle now, no longer enough to chase away the chill entirely, but it was enough to bring comfort, a reminder that they were not alone in the darkness. For soldiers, that mattered greatly, knowing that even in silence, the presence of comrades was near. A few whispered prayers floated softly upward, almost indistinguishable from the sigh of the breeze. These prayers were not shouted or recited in strict ritual. They were personal, quiet, often spoken without formality, as if the night itself were listening. Some prayed for safety, others for their families, and some simply whispered words without meaning, seeking the comfort of a voice, even their own, in the stillness. In the distance, a horse shifted in its tether, stamping a hoof against the earth before settling again. The sound was steady, grounding, another reminder that life in the camp continued even as most slept. The animals, too, seemed subdued by the quiet, their breathing slow, their movements gentle, as if they, too, understood the need for rest. There was a deep rhythm in the camp that night, the steady rise and fall of breath, the occasional turn of a body seeking comfort, the faint crackle of a log collapsing into a shawl of it, wove together into a soft pattern, a music without instruments, a song meant to calm. For a few soldiers, dreams began to take shape. Some dreamed of familiar faces waiting at home, of cottages, of mothers or wives preparing meals in quiet kitchens. Others dreamed of nothing at all, sinking into the deep stillness that comes when the body is simply too weary to form pictures in the mind. And some, in lighter sleep, hovered between both worlds, half aware of the camp around them, half lost in wandering thoughts that had no beginning and no end. The sentries, walking their rounds, moved like shadows, their steps careful and measured. Each one carried not only his weapon, but also the unspoken promise of safety, holding the quiet on behalf of the others. To them, the silence was not emptiness, it was a responsibility, a fragile shield that needed watching, and yet even they found calm in it. For the night carried no alarm, only the soft passage of ours. Overhead, the stars gleamed steadily, ancient and patient. Soldiers resting beneath them may have thought of home, or they may not have thought at all. But above them, the sky remained vast and unchanging, as it had been for countless generations of warriors before. It offered no words, no promises, but it gave something quieter, the reassurance of continuity, of stillness, of something larger than the battles of men. Time passed slowly, almost unnoticeably, the way time does in sleep. The night unfolded not in moments of action, but in layers of quiet, one drifting seamlessly into the next, until the idea of hours themselves seemed to dissolve. And in that long, uninterrupted calm, the soldiers, those weary travelers of conflict, as the hours stretched further into the night, the camp seemed to fall into an even deeper layer of stillness. The sounds of day-marching boots, clashing steel, hurried orders were far away now, replaced by nothing more than the quiet breathing of men at rest. It was as if the world itself had chosen to pause, holding them gently between the wariness of the past and the demands of the future. The fire, now reduced to little more than glowing fragments, gave off a dim orange light that flickered faintly across the soldiers' faces. Shadows lengthened and shortened with the shifting embers, moving slowly like drifting clouds. For those who stirred in their sleep, the glow may have felt like a candle kept burning just for them, a soft reminder that warmth still lingered in the darkness. A soldier near the edge of the camp adjusted his cloak, pulling it tighter around his shoulders. He shifted onto his side, one arm tucked beneath his head, the other resting loosely across his chest. His breathing deepened, steady and even, until it joined the gentle rhythm of those around him. Each man, though burdened by his own memories and fears, found release in the simple act of sleep. Somewhere nearby, a night insect chirped faintly, its song small but persistent. It created a background hum, barely noticeable, yet strangely comforting. Together with the soft sigh of the wind, it added texture to the silence, filling it, without disturbing it, to a drifting mind. These sounds could blend into dreamscapes, turning into the imagined rustle of leaves, the crackle of a distant hearth, or the faint ringing of bells in a faraway village. The watchmen continued their rounds, steady and careful. One paused at the far end of the camp, leaning on his spear as he gazed into the distance. His eyes traced the horizon, but his mind was calm. He knew his comrades were safe for now, and in that knowledge, his duty felt lighter. Even for him, standing guard beneath the quiet night sky, there was a kind of rest. Above, the moon drifted slowly, casting its pale silver light across the land. Its glow touched the tops of helmets and the edges of shields lying in the grass, making them shimmer faintly, like forgotten treasures half buried in the earth. The soldiers, though unaware in their slumber, were bathed in that same gentle light, as if the sky itself wished to keep them safe. Hours passed this way, quietly, seamlessly. Time, measured in the steady beat of hearts and the unbroken cycles of breath, slipped gently onward. The men slept, and the camp became a world of stillness, a small island of peace in the wide sea of conflict. For those who dreamed, the visions were simple and soothing. Perhaps a memory of home, where a candle flickered on a wooden table. Perhaps the sound of laughter carried across a quiet courtyard. Or perhaps nothing at all, only a drifting sense of ease. Dreams did not need to be vivid to bring comfort. Sometimes their gentlest form was enough. And so the soldiers rested unaware of how much they needed this pause, unaware of how precious these hours of calm truly were. Yet in this fragile stillness, their strength slowly returned. Like a field recovering after rain, quietly, patiently, without fanfare. The night, in its stillness, seemed endless. It stretched like a wide, quiet ocean, calm and unhurried. For the soldiers lying scattered across the camp, each moment blended seamlessly into the next, so gently that time itself felt dissolved. Sleep had taken most of them fully now, and in their rest the burdens of the day slipped away, at least for a little while. The embers of the fire pulsed faintly, glowing red, then fading, then glowing again. It was a rhythm so steady that one might imagine it was breathing too, joining the men in their deep rest. The faint warmth it offered was not strong, yet it was a Nufa reminder of the bond between them, of the shared circle where life was held, together against the wide silence of the night. A few soldiers shifted in their sleep. One murmured softly, though his words were broken, the language of dreams rather than waking. Another turned onto his back, his arm falling loosely at his side. These small movements, far from disturbing the quiet, became part of it, natural and unremarkable, like leaves stirred gently by the breeze. The watchmen, steady in their task, moved like shadows along the edge of the camp. They paused now and then, listening. The silence was not empty, it was alive with soft sounds. The occasional chirp of an insect, the crack of a branch in the distance, the faint whicker of a horse shifting in its sleep. Each sound came and passed, none carrying threat, all weaving into the calm fabric of the night. Above, the stars seemed sharper now, gleaming like tiny fires scattered across the sky. To one who might look upward, they gave a sense of vastness, of timelessness. Generations of soldiers, long before these, had rested beneath the same stars, had felt the same mix of exhaustion and relief as they surrendered to the dark. The thought, if it came, would be a quiet one, a reminder that they were not alone in their rest, but part of a rhythm as old as war itself. A soldier nearest the fire drew his cloak tighter, his hand brushing against the small wooden token he kept close to his chest. It might have been carved by a loved one, or found along a journey. Its shape, worn smooth by touch, was enough to anchor him, even in sleep. Objects like these, simple and small, carried power, not the power of battle, but the power of memory, of hope, of connection. The night deepened further. The air grew colder, but the men remained still, curled against the earth. Their rest was heavy now, deep and unbroken, the kind of rest that Bodhis take when there is no choice but to surrender. And all around them, the world was calm. No alarms, no cries, no sudden motions, only the slow, steady passage of the hours, marked by nothing more than the movement of stars across the sky and the quiet shift of the breeze across the grass. It was peace, fragile and temporary, yet as real as the breath in their lungs, between the weight of battles past and the shadow of battles yet to come. This peace was a gift, and in it the soldiers lay cradled, safe in their circle of silence. The camp remained quiet, wrapped in a heavy blanket of night. Every sound was softened, every movement slow, as if the world itself were breathing deeply in slumber. The faint glow of the fire had faded further. Now only a few sparks resting in the ash, winking like tired eyes that could no longer stay awake. Yet even without the fire, a sense of warmth lingered in the air, carried not by flame, but by closeness, the nearness of men lying side by side, their shared breath clouding faintly in the cool night. A soldier shifted onto his side, his cloak rustling softly. He murmured in sleep, perhaps dreaming of home, perhaps of nothing at all. Another, lying with his arm across his chest, sighed deeply, the sound long and quiet, almost blending with the whisper of the wind. At the edges of the camp, the guards walked their steady path, step after step, unhurried, measured. Their eyes scanned the darkness, but they were not afraid. The stillness itself seemed to protect them, holding the camp in a cocoon of silence. The guards' thoughts drifted like clouds' memories of meals shared, of laughter around a fire, of faces left behind but not forgotten. In the distance, an owl called once, its low voice echoing gently through the trees. Then silence returned, fuller than before, as though the night had folded that sound into itself. The soldiers did not stir at the call. They were too deep in their rest. The sky above, wide and endless, stretched in velvet black, each star a quiet companion. Some shone brighter, steady and patient, as if keeping watch when men could not. It was easy to imagine those stars as lanterns hung high, lights placed there to reassure weary hearts that even in darkness there was guidance. A horse snorted softly and stamped its hoof, shaking off a dream. Another shifted beside it, the quiet sound of leather and tack creaking briefly before stillness returned. These simple noises, the shifting of an animal, the creak of rope, the sigh of earth, became part of the night's rhythm, a lullaby written not with instruments, but with life itself. And still the soldiers slept. Their bodies lay heavy, their faces calm, the lines of weariness softened by rest. Here, between battles, they found the rarest gift, not victory, not triumph, but simply the chance to breathe, to close their eyes, to be still. Time passed unnoticed. The stars wheeled overhead, unseen by closed eyes. Dreams came and went, quiet as shadows. The camp, small against the vastness of the world, lay as if suspended and unhurried, deeply at peace. The night deepened further, slipping quietly into its most silent hour. It was the kind of darkness that felt thick and protective, as if the world itself wished to cradle the weary in its arms. Around the camp, the earth breathed its steady rhythm. The faint smell of damp soil mingled with the scent of smoke that still lingered from the fire. Occasionally, the quiet shift of a horse's weight or the soft crunch of a boot on the patrol path broke the stillness. But these sounds were never harsh. They blended into the calm, becoming part of the night's gentle harmony. The guards, steady in their rounds, walked with a kind of patience that only came from long practice. They knew the rhythm of nights like these, the way silence stretched, the way thoughts wandered, the way time seemed to move more slowly than the day. One of them hummed faintly under his breath, the tune simple and low, almost swallowed by the wind. Perhaps it was a melody remembered from childhood, or perhaps it was nothing more than a fragment of sound meant to keep him company. The sleepers did not stir. Their dreams, if they dreamed, were gentle. Some might have seen fields from their youth, golden with wheat, bending softly under summer air. Others might have walked again through the streets of their hometowns, hearing the voices of loved ones carried faintly across time. And some, perhaps, dreamed of nothing at all, simply floating in a darkness as soft as the night around them. Every so often, a soldier shifted, pulling his cloak closer, curling against the cool air. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, like the turning of a page in a quiet book. Then stillness returned again, wide and unbroken. Above them, the stars had grown brighter, as though the world, in its deepest rest, had allowed their light to shine more clearly. They twinkled gently, without urgency, without need. If the soldiers could see them, they might have felt comfort in knowing that countless generations before them had looked upon those same stars, finding guidance, hope, or simply a reminder that the sky was always watching. The night was not lonely. Though quiet, it was filled with presence, the steady breath of men, the soft sounds of animals, the faint whisper of trees swaying gently at the edge of camp. Even silence itself seemed alive, carrying with it the sense that all things were, for this moment, safe and whole. Time, unhurried, continued its silent passage. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded, only the soft weaving of night, wrapping every soul in calm. The fire had faded now into the faintest embers, glowing softly like small hearts within the ash. Their warmth was no longer felt at a distance, yet the faint orange glow gave the ground a sense of quiet life, as though the camp itself still breathed slowly in its sleep. A soldier turned slightly near the fire, his face relaxed, his breathing even, his hand still resting near the hilt of his sword knot in readiness. But in habit, the instinct of one who lived half his life prepared. Beyond him, another man stirred in his sleep, murmuring a sound too soft to be understood. Perhaps it was a fragment of a dream, perhaps a remembered word from someone far away. Then he fell still again, his breath resuming its steady rhythm. The guards who kept watch remained steady. One leaned lightly against a wooden post, his eyes sweeping the quiet landscape. There was no urgency in his gaze, only the steady patience of one who had seen countless nights like this before. He shifted his weight, pulled his cloak closer, and allowed his thoughts to wander. Perhaps he imagined home. Perhaps he thought of the bread that would be shared when morning came. Or perhaps he thought of nothing at all, letting the silence fill his mind like a river filling a valley. Far off, an owl called, its voice soft and hollow, echoing faintly against the distant trees. The sound drifted over the camp like a ripple, then faded back into stillness. The men did not stir at it. It was the sound of peace, of the world carrying on as it always had, without hurry, without end. The air itself seemed thick with calm, the faint scent of earth, of smoke, of leather and wool, mingled into something simple, almost comforting. A man asleep here would not think of battles, nor of the clamor of weapons. He would think only of the steady quiet, the protection of comrades close by, the certainty that for this night, at least, there was nothing more to do. The stars above, brighter still, stretched across the whole sky like a soft curtain of light. The Milky Way itself seemed to drift like a river of silver mist, flowing endlessly, never rushing. If anyone were awake enough to look up at it, they might feel as though the heavens themselves were keeping watch, offering a light that asked for nothing, only giving. Time passed unnoticed. It was not measured in minutes or hours, but only in the deepening of silence, the slow shifting of breath, the quiet murmur of the earth. The night was not empty, it was full of rest, of peace, of the kind of stillness that held the world together. And so the camp continued to sleep, wrapped in its blanket of night, safe within the arms of silence.